All right. Well, welcome everyone to our office hours session today. My name is Tim Chen, Director of Product Management in the Oracle Backup Recovery Technologies team. Our topic today is going to be on Oracle Database 23AI Recovery Manager new features. Hopefully everyone here knows about RMAN. Most people have used it for quite some time. So as with every database release, our recovery manager or our backup recovery engine for the database continues to innovate and get enhanced. And so for this session, we'll go through kind of an overview of the key new capabilities, and we'll also give you pointers to additional information at the end where you get to read the documentation. One thing I just want to note is that Oracle Database 23AI is not yet available for platforms other than Exadata, okay, as today. Other platforms such as Spark, AIX, and so forth will be announced at a later date. So please keep that in mind as you go through these slides about the current status of the 23AI general on-premises release. Okay. So with that, we're going to start with just a brief walk through history of Recovery Manager, and take a look at some of the sort of the areas that it's actually been very instrumental in, okay, over the course of time. And then we'll delve into the new features, and then we'll wrap it up with a summary. And of course, any questions, please use the Q&A function in our webinar. So it's hard to believe, but RMAN has been in existence for almost 3 decades. I was looking at this the other day that RMAN was introduced in Oracle 8.0, and that was a long time ago, just almost 30 years ago. And so we're really celebrating this 3 decades now of database protection and recovery and more, right? You can see here that RMAN, its core functionality to back up and recover the database, obviously it was kind of the foundation, and that was for disk backups, as you see here, extending to tape and third-party backup storage and backup products. And then moving to other use cases such as cloning and deduplication. For duplication of databases. That is creating copies of your database for test dev, for creating standby databases, for transferring data or migrating data, right? Platform migration is also a very powerful use case for RMAN when you're talking about bulk data transfers, especially for very large databases. RMAN has also evolved to really become sort of the integrated driver, if you will, for our engineered systems and our cloud services enterprise database protection offerings, such as Zero Data Loss Recovery Appliance and Zero Data Loss Autonomous Recovery Service you see here. These are our two offerings today that really scale and give you very innovative features for database backup and recovery. And again, this is only possible because of the RMAN integration that's available within our area. RMAN also supports cloud object storage, that is to OCI object storage and S3. And RMAN can be used for database integrity and recovery validation checks, right? This is obviously a very important area because, your database, its logical and physical consistency, right, may get affected. For whatever reason, if it's software or hardware related, and RMAN has the capability of doing validations as needed. So just as I've already mentioned, kind of high level, disk backups is one of the primary use cases for RMAN. Backing up to restoring from ASM or NFS storage, extending that to third-party backup and tape. Now, tape has been around for a long time, and we're seeing more customers move to disk-based media, but still what we consider as sort of third-party, if you will, backup products that work with RMAN. So if it's not physical tape, it doesn't really matter to RMAN. Really, it's just about any destination outside of our disk backup that you see there. And so we work with Oracle Secure Backup, which is our media management software product, and also all the leading tape backup and third-party solutions. Cloning and duplication uses the RMAN duplicate command, which is being able to clone a database from a live database, directly from a live database in the data files, or an existing backup if you need to clone a database from a disk location, from another third-party backups location. RMAN can manage the entire process to create that new database. Essentially, it's a restore, right, operation, and we also allow the database to be configured so that it can be brought open and accessible as a real database at the end of this process. RMAN also drives platform migrations, as I mentioned, for performing inline Indian conversions, especially when you're moving from older platforms, a legacy such as, maybe some Solaris or AX, and you're trying to move to Exadata, for example. RMAN's a great tool to be able to facilitate that migration by doing high performance bulk transfer of the data with minimal downtime. We talked about, or I mentioned, ZDLRA, our recovery appliance, which is a unique offering to reduce backup windows and accelerate recovery with no data loss. It's really about minimizing that data loss window to 0 or sub-seconds, right? That's only possible, again, because of an Oracle to Oracle only technology integration that we have. Similarly, with recovery service, this is a recovery appliance based cloud service. Essentially, we extended recovery appliance now so that cloud databases that are on OCI, Azure, Google Cloud, and AWS can take advantage of the same great features of recovery appliance. And RMAN drives this whole scenarios as well, right? For backup and restore, you don't need to know anything except RMAN. And especially even in cloud, we've automated the whole process within the tooling so that you can essentially just use our cloud UI and our automation to conduct and manage all these backup recovery operations. RMAN natively connects to our object storage, that is for OCI public object storage, or it can also connect to on-premise devices such as ZFS. ZFS exposes OCI object storage interfaces. It also exposes S3 object storage interfaces, and for both of those, RMAN is able to back up to those devices. And then lastly, again, checking integrity and validation of the database for recoverability. Very important. This is a very often overlooked use case. And in a lot of cases, because customers don't really have the time or the effort to really run validations across their estate. This could be hundreds of thousands of databases, and to run those validation processes can take time and also put load on the database server. Going back to recovery appliance and recovery service, this particular aspect of recovery validation is actually handled by these services and systems now. The recovery appliance technology actually can do the validation and check for recoverability on the storage itself now. Okay, it doesn't require an RMAN to run that restore validate. So keep that in mind that if you're looking to have much more stringent, if you will, recovery point objectives, you're trying to attain much higher protection, maybe for your business critical databases to protect, for example, from cyber or ransomware attacks. Please consider the recovery appliance and recovery service. These are great products to be able to really, bring up level the protection status and recoverability, and be able to give you insights into that too, as we do validation of all the backups in those offerings themselves. All right, so moving on to then just 23AI. And the RMAN key new features and improvements. I've grouped some of the features that I'll speak to in kind of 4 categories. One is about greater ease of use. Second, about enhanced tape and cloud backup support. Third one is on improved security, and the fourth one is on internal optimization. So oftentimes the last category, we don't really talk a lot about the internal enhancements and optimizations, but I really want to show this for 23i, because we've done quite a bit of work to make it just even better, right, from a user experience standpoint, and you'll see those at the end. So We'll go ahead and start and talk to the greater ease of use capabilities. That is our simplified Oracle native backup modules, delivery and usage, end-to-end database platform migration, and one-step configuration with OCI immutable object storage buckets. So first of all, if any of you have used RMAN with our recovery appliance offering or OCI object storage or S3 object storage, you're probably familiar with these backup modules. These are what we call SPT device type backup modules for RMAN. And essentially, these are interfaces by which RMAN can back up and restore from to other destinations, again, outside of its disk backups, right, through ASM or NFS. With 23AI, these backup modules and Java installers for those modules are delivered directly in the 23AI release and updates, and they're delivered in the Oracle Home lib directory. In the past, you would have to download these modules. You'd have to check whether they're updated or not and kind of manage that yourselves. We've integrated the modules directly with the Oracle database release train, if you will, and those are released in situ with the major releases and release updates for DB23AI. So you'll see those libraries or modules listed there. And in 23AI, you can also configure and use these destinations much easier. We've made aliases where you can see here for recovery appliance with oracle.zdlra, with the cloud module, oracle.oci, and with our for our S3 backup module, oracle.osbws. These are aliases you specify now in your configure and allocate channel commands that you see here, right? So you don't need to specify the library path. You don't need to, again, check and download the latest library. Just use the modules that come with the release that you're running. That's it, right? And these modules also support FIPS 140 now compliant databases. It is a security requirement, especially for government institutions, to be able to comply with that. And now these modules, because they're released for every software release of the DB23AI and every RU, we're able to also keep up to date with any FIPS 140 module changes in the database and so forth, and the backups and restores will continue to be compatible. Moving on to our next point about greater ease of use is RMAN taking care of the end-to-end database platform migration. This is a very often used activity with RMAN backups, right? Backups are done day in and day out. Hopefully you don't have to actually restore databases in DR situations like frequently, but those backups have still a lot of great use, right? And I said cloning, for example, to create new test dev databases, standby databases, and now we're talking about using backups for platform migration. So what happens here in this process is that the RMAN backups you take today, and as you've when the general on-premises release is available on your source platform, which could be, say, Spark or AIX or another older platform, RMAN, those backups can be used by RMAN on the destination side, or the destination platform or database, to restore the data files and plug in the table space or pluggable database metadata. So you can do the whole, at a table space level for a non-CDB database, or you can go for a CDB database and only migrate certain PDBs out of the CDB. And this requires a recovery catalog or transport file. So you can kind of go through both modes, and I'll show you how to do that. But in the past, to do this platform migration, you've had to use RMAN backup and restore commands in conjunction with other scripts to be able to do the unplug and plug in of the metadata, for example, and to coordinate that whole process together. There are support notes you see below that we've documented and kind of is the current state for those who are on 19C. But with RMAN 23i, we eliminate a lot of all those external scripts and complexities. So really the benefits is streamlining this entire process, leveraging the regular RMAN backups to transport the data, and this can also be used to minimize downtime. The way that downtime is minimized in this process is using incremental backups, and this is a great way to keep your source database rewritable until you need to cut over, okay, to the newly migrated database. And incremental backups allow you to do that in order to keep the destination as current as possible. And then when the cutover is ready, we take a final incremental in read-only mode, and that incremental is restored and applied and Endian converted to that destination, and you can open the database at that point. So that is kind of a very short kind of like workflow of what happens, and we'll go through again more details. Now, most of you are on 19C today, so if you're looking to do 19C to 19C migrations or 19C to a new 23AI migration, when that say on your Exadata systems, then you're going to be using this doc note, which is listed here. And this gives you all the latest and greatest features and capabilities for RMAN to be able to conduct this. Actually, in 19C, we've done some backporting of some of this new 23i functionality, so you will see it appear as well in some of the steps, okay, in this note. But just note that the full official release of these new features is in DB23i, and that would be for the needed on the source database and on the destination database. So specifically, what's new, okay, in doing this migration strategy? When you there's two kinds of transports I'll speak to. One is using a catalog connection. When you use a catalog, it's simpler. There are more things we can do because we have this history of metadata backups versus just in the control file itself. And we always recommend having a catalog regardless, especially if you have enterprise kind of landscape for your databases. So you can consolidate the history, that catalog database can be protected accordingly, right, and so forth. So on the destination database in this process, the two new commands, if you will, introduced with 23AI are restore preview to transport list, and this command will allow the metadata, okay, that is part of the table space or PDBs that you want to migrate, and allow the metadata to be populated in memory, okay, in the RMAN session. That's a new thing, okay, and so when that metadata is populated in memory, RMAN will then use that metadata to be able to complete the restore foreign pluggable database in this case from transport list. This actually allows the entire process to be done in one RMAN session on the destination database. Okay, so that's new, as well as if you're not using a catalog, all right, there is new commands to be able to do on the source DB, restore preview to transport file and then give it your file name. This basically does a similar thing as with the catalog connection, except it's writing it to a file called transport file, which is then copied to the destination database for access, and then you run that restore foreign pluggable database from transport file and give it that transport file path name. So it will accomplish the same thing at the end of the day with both of these approaches. It's just that the catalog connection obviously is more simplified because you don't need to actually copy any of the files over, and you can do this directly from the catalog, and it will read it from the catalog database and from the backups, right, that are recorded in the catalog and populated in memory. Now, in a full example I'll show you now, you'll see kind of what happens on the source side and on the destination side when you're using this new migration commands. So on the left side, you have the source database, and here we're connecting to the CDB root and to the recovery catalog. And what we're going to do here is we're going to make this HRPDB a consistent backup. Now, this doesn't use our minimal downtime approach, but you will find documentation at the end that I'll provide that shows you how to do this for the incremental or minimal downtime approach. This is basically doing a full backup of this PDB, so we need to be able to do this in a consistent mode, and so we close that PDB first. Now, the next step is to back up that PDB database. We call it HRPDB. And what we have here are two things to call out. One is we have an XML file called HRPDB unplug.xml. This is an optional metadata file, if you will. If you choose to want to transport this PDB at a later time versus having RMAN do it right after the backup is done. Okay. Some customers want to be able to have discretion on when they want to actually restore and plug in that PDB on the destination, and so we give you that option to be able to have a separate metadata file. Okay, that's created here. And the second thing I want to call out is the XML backup format at the end. Okay, this parameter specifies the actual RMAN backup piece that will contain the metadata itself. And this is actually new as well in 23AI. Basically, it's a backup piece that just contains that metadata. And then we give it this tag. We give it a tag to be able to notate this entire backup set. Now, why is that important? Because we can then use the tag in the destination you see on the right. So once we've done the backup, now let's move to the destination. We will connect to the CDB root of the destination database and to the same recovery catalog. The first step is always the same. We have to, in the RMAN session, we have to direct it to the correct DBID. So this is a DBID for this CDB, and then we're going to restore preview to transport list, specifying the tag that we notated before in the backup, and the pluggable database name. Right. As I mentioned before, this restore preview to transport list will essentially inject the metadata that was recorded in the backup in memory on the destination RMAN session now. Okay. It's in the RMAN session, it's in memory, and at this point, we're then going to clear the foreign DBID because we're going to now restore this foreign pluggable database. This foreign means it was not originally part of this database. Okay. So when we do this restore pluggable database from transport list, it will then restore the backups of the data files themselves, and it will also import the metadata from that in-memory transport list, right, that we talked about already. So this is done in one session. At the end of this session, the database is ready to be opened, read-only, for example, or read-write if you're ready to give it full access. And so you have a discretion of running these two restore commands, of when to open the database, for example, and doing this at a PDB level. You may also do this at a whole CDB level if you want to, or table spaces by table spaces for specific application needs, for example. So everything you've known before about these migration-related commands, we've basically made it much more simplified now, where you can do this in a much more streamlined fashion using the transport list and using this in memory with the catalog connection. So from requirements perspective, let's talk about when you're performing PDB migrations and tablespace migrations. For PDB migrations, your source and destination must be on the same endian format. This is true for the 23AI. This potentially we might be able to look at that for future releases, but today this is really just about being able to restore and plug in PDBs from the same endian formats. Okay, your PDB must also use local undo. Okay, in this case, for tablespace migrations, the only requirements here is the tablespace is self-contained, and what I mean by self-contained is there's no external relationships or dependencies to other tablespaces that are not part of that set that's being migrated. You can use transport set check from DBMS TTS package, and you'll be able to see if the table spaces that are in focus are all self-contained and don't rely on anything outside the set. Now, for table spaces, your source and destination can be on different endian formats. Okay, for this particular case, so that's a larger use case there, where you can do an entire CDB and be able to transport with the restore database command, the entire database with all its table spaces, which may have PDBs and so forth, to a different platform as well. All right, the next topic about greater ease of use is the one-step configuration of RMAN with the OCI object storage buckets. And these are immutable buckets. And what do I mean by immutable? Well, as many of you know, especially with regulatory requirements and ransomware protection kind of concerns, your backups are, obviously prime targets. And one of the enforcement methods is to make those backups non-deletable and non-modifiable by any user. Okay, and that's what we mean by immutable, immutable state, if you will. At some point, the immutability is expired. So there's we call a locked retention rule that you specify with the in the bucket itself, in the object storage, and as long as the backup is within that retention rule, it will not be deletable or modifiable by anyone. That means it will consume space, right, in the buckets as well until it's expired. So with this new enhancement, we basically have the Java installer, right? We talked about the cloud backup module for OCI before, and there's a new parameter we introduce to be able to essentially configure immutable backup, immutable buckets with RMAN end to end. Okay. In the past, when you wanted to do an immutable bucket configuration, you would need to be able to, after running the installer, then go in and hand modify the configuration file that's used by RMAN to know the bucket name, the container names, different parameters for that bucket itself. And that was an additional step for every database that you'd have to do. With the installer now, you have this dash immutable bucket, okay, option now. And this dash immutable bucket means you can now just directly specify that bucket name, and this will automatically get populated into the configuration file. And you'll also have this temporary metadata bucket. This is for just the purposes of recording metadata as the backups are being taken to object storage. We need that metadata in order to compose the object storage artifacts back into actual RMAN backup pieces. So that bucket is separate. It's a read-writable normal bucket. And so with those two specified in installer, you'll then be able to start using the RMAN OCI backup module, right? And specified in your channels and be able to take backup and restore commands from that point on. So we've simplified it by essentially just having a one-step installer and with this option, and you're now configured for the immutable buckets. Now let's move on to the enhanced tape backup support. I do see some Q&A questions going on. Okay, why don't I just take a pause and look at some of these questions since we're on the topic. Does this migration require a static listener? That's a great question. It doesn't require a static listener, as my understanding is. Maybe that was needed in the past, but no, that is not my understanding. We can obviously double check that at the end of the session. I can go to the docs, but I don't believe that's needed. Okay, is this method supported to do the migration from a standby DB instance? Great question. So in a standby database case, you will have the standby, the MRP must be stopped in order for the standby to be used as a source for the migration. You can also open the standby read-only, and that can also become a source for the migration. Those two things are needed before using that. Okay. Does it have to be a OCI object storage, or could it be a third-party object storage? Okay, this is just a general backup question. When RMAN's native, if you will, or Oracle supplied backup modules are for OCI object storage, and again for AWS S3 public storage, object storage. You may use other third-party object storage. At this point, it's not. It would need to adhere to either the OCI or to an S3 interface APIs. Okay. to function. And we've seen cases where on-premise object storage, their implementations may differ than what the public object storage does. And so there can be issues that arise, and you would need to sort that out with your third-party object storage vendor. The other way is the third-party vendor supplies their own RMAN backup module for their storage, and they can do whatever protocol implementation they want as long as they adhere to our RMAN APIs for the backup module. Another question, is the immutable backup option only with database 23i, or can we use it in 19C? So yes, good question. 19C did support immutable backups to object storage buckets. This was configured. This could be configured with RMAN, and it required that additional step where you had to manually update the opc.ora file after you run the installer for the bucket and container names and other attributes that are needed in that file for the RMAN configuration. And there's a separate doc to be able to use that. I have it at the end where you would see how to use it for 19C, and then we refer customers to the RMAN 23AI user's guide to actually run the steps for the new installer. Okay, so there's two versions of how to use the installer there and what steps are required. Any plans to have a GUI tool integration into SQL Developer? Okay, that's kind of outside of the backup recovery realm. We can follow up with that with our GUI folks and our tool folks there. Okay, any changes to standby database impact when transporting table spaces to a primary? In 19C, we have to copy plugged in files to the standby. Right. We're going to, we can follow up with you, Sarah, on this question. It's a good question. I know about that behavior where we have to copy those plugged in files separately to the standby. And but yes, to be definitive, we will follow up and we'll, if you could, put that question into our session, okay, Q&A landing pad, and we'll be able to get back to you that way. Okay, great. Thanks for those questions. All right, let's move on. So moving on to enhanced tape cloud backup support. This is going to allow your backups on SPT device types, that is tape, cloud, third-party media, to be able to be copied across destinations. Okay, so we're calling this feature SPT to SPT backup copy. One of the use cases that we've heard customers talk about and kind of leading up to this kind of feature development was, you know, I have backups on legacy backup media, say on tape or, you know, old storage, and I really want to keep those backups around. I need to get to newer storage, more scalable, modern storage, for example, more performance storage, and but I want to keep my backups. So I don't want to have to keep two sets of backups. I want to be able to move those backups and still have RMAN be aware of them. So this is kind of what we came up with, is a backup set new option, okay, where you can copy backup sets from one SP2 location, for example, from tape or third-party backup software library, to a different location, for example, OCI object storage or recovery appliance, or ZDLRA. And the RMAN backup records in the control file, you know, and the catalog, if you use a catalog, are updated. So now we can access and report and restore the backups from those new locations as well. One thing that this new operation does, it does perform inline encryption if needed during the copy. So for example, if you're copying backups from a third-party backup software library to a OCI, object storage bucket, OCI requires encryption. It's a mandatory for any data entering the OCI outside of OCI. And so RMAN automatically applies encryption during that case. You may specify this optionally as well to perform that encryption. This is the format of the command that we use now, okay, to do this new backup set command. You have your normal allocate channel, okay, with the parameters of your SPT library, in this case, oracle.oci. This is the OCI object storage, where backups will be taken, okay, in this session. And then you have a new parameter called input device. And the input device is the is the source interface where the backups are kept and which you want to move to now the new destination. So these backups from third party, okay, destination will be moved or copied to the Oracle OCI object storage buckets. And these will be in RMAN format as they're copied once we do the backups at all. Okay, so imagine this is a copy where we basically just keep, we're copying the backups over. There are new records created for those new copies in the new destination, and RMAN will be able to restore from that new destination just like before. Okay, and obviously when you're going to do this operationally, if you have many months or years and so forth, lots of volume of backups, you want to make sure you do test it, test it for performance, test it for to make sure that backups can be read from your legacy media and they don't cause interruptions and so forth during the process. All right, so we're also going to now cover the security aspect of the new features with the new XTS-based backup encryption algorithm. Okay. Oops. Okay, so as you know, we've offered AES based encryption algorithms for some time. Okay, and as these implementations of algorithms, as the industry standards are evolving, so does the database, right? And so RMAN for backup encryption has always inherited that encryption capability from the underlying database security infrastructure. And as we look at 23AI, XTS is now becoming kind of the industry standard in terms of a cipher-based encryption mode, if you will. So in 23AI, the new default for our RMAN encryption is AES 256 XTS. Okay, we've desupported AES 192, and you can use AES 128 XTS mode. That's optional. Okay, these are the three algorithms that are supported, choices that are supported. And for those who are not familiar with XTS, this is an acronym for the XEX tweakable block ciphertext stealing. This is essentially a new block cipher mode. It was designed as a stronger alternative to other cipher modes such as CBC or cipher block chaining. Okay. Cipher blocks or cipher text is a source of, or the source as a target of attacks these days, and so there's vulnerabilities with the older cipher modes, which you have patterns that can be recognized in these ciphers, and obviously that gives the attacker more entry points and ability to decrypt and to be able to get into the actual clear text of the file itself. What XTS does is it ensures that each block produces a unique ciphertext. So what happens is each block is AES encrypted, then it's encrypted using the ciphertext. And this ciphertext is a hash of the actual text with some other Gaussian algorithms that are there. So it's extremely hard to crack, reading it myself and the implementation, and especially again with the advanced kind of the playing field of attacks these days and of decryption tools and advancement there. We really want to keep up to date with the most modern encryption algorithms these days, and that's XTS. Okay, finally, I want to review our internal optimizations, which will have enhanced performance and high availability capabilities with RMAN backup recovery operations. So first of all, let's take a look at performance and efficiency enhancements in 23AI. RMAN can now, the catalog can now be upgraded while RMAN jobs are running. Okay, and so that upgrade catalog allows the catalog schema to be updated to the most recent release of that target database, right? And so as your RMAN jobs are running, as the upgrade catalog is running, those don't conflict now during in the same session, okay, that are being run. Now, this is really about availability as well, so that you don't have to, especially if you have a large enterprise database estate and you're having to take some window to upgrade the catalog. This helps you minimize that window so that your in-process RMAN jobs do not get affected, okay, during that upgrade catalog process. We also save time statistics for planning purposes. So any kind of operations that are done internally, we're keeping time statistics, and we're trying to compile those for additional improvements and enhancements in the future. Okay, so when you create like an RMAN debug trace file, when those are in an SR, for example, we'll actually glean not any customer data, obviously nothing that's sensitive, but rather just the time stats for the different phases of a backup or recovery operation or other type of process that's going on, and we use that to enhance our own RMAN code base to be much more performant and capable, okay, for future operations. Corrupt data file blocks are automatically fixed with validate database now. So validate database has been a command to actually check if you have logical or physical corruptions in your database or problems. By running validate database in 23AI, those blocks get automatically fixed from the corresponding backups as well. So it saves you time by not having to run recovery or media recovery after that case. We have also updated the compression algorithm to faster Z standard algorithm. This is kind of the more modern algorithms that we have. We've implemented zlib and other ones in the past, and now we've moved to Z standard. The database itself has also moved in 23AI to that standard. It gives very fast compression, faster than our current ones in 19C, and it gives you a great compression ratio, a good balance of that compression ratio as well. Moving on to high availability enhancements, resyncs are one of the areas where we've definitely gotten a lot of feedback from customers, and we've done some work to make resyncs much more highly available in terms of RMAN sessions and performance. Okay, so the first resync or the initial resync after you register a database is made more efficient. Those of you with large databases, lots of tables, lots of data files, etc., we have to essentially populate the catalog with all that information on the first resync. We streamlined things so that the entire set doesn't have to be transferred in bulk at one time. We can actually do that resync progressively now, and so it doesn't the window in which that resync happens until you can actually get back the RMAN prompt to start your backup operations and so forth. That's shrunk down as well. Okay, we do those in the background, and as needed, we will also transfer the metadata over. Internally, we also created save points. So this allows us during an RMAN process to prevent loss of work during a resync operation. So if we have some interruption or some kind of connection loss or something like that in a resync operation, that is when the control file is in a sync with its catalog, we do have resumability now. And so you don't have to redo the resync from the beginning of the records, which can take some time. We've also minimized dependency on the client RMAN executable connection to the recovery catalog. What we do this is by disconnecting the catalog connection during the backup execution phase. We actually don't need the catalog connection during that part, because really the catalog connection is needed at the beginning to do the resync before the backup starts, and at the end to do a final resync of the new backup records and so forth in order to write out the catalog. So during the backup itself, everything is preserved and kept in the control file, so you're not going to get any missing records or anything like that. But this alleviates issues where, especially we have large databases and you've got a network interruption or some other issue, and you lose that catalog connection, and then the RMAN session fails, and then you have to restart from the beginning with a new catalog connection and start over. So it's a great reliever of time when you're now doing backups in case that there are interruptions or failures in that to the catalog. Block media recovery for RMAN now supports ASM file directory entries, and the FRA now can manage space for foreign archive logs. Foreign archive logs are those coming from other databases with different DB-IDs. This might be useful for things like Golden Gate or for other kind of log miner or any other type of uses that you need those foreign archive logs on that same database as well. They were not recognized by the FRA before and for space management purposes, and now they are. So they will be purged and reclaimed as needed. From a diagnostics perspective, RMAN has better detection of performance and network problems now, with a lot of the diag work automatically done. We do in-memory RMAN tracing, and we've done improvements on the type of tracing that's possible now. So, you know, when you hit a performance issue or some kind of a hung situation, you know, those can happen. We collect all that information already up front in the RMAN tracing, and I think that customers having to reproduce the test case again and again can be frustrating. So our goal is to be able to gather everything needed during the actual problematic run, even before we know about it, and that tracing that's available already from our failure, okay, that's produced after the failure, will contain much more information now and be able to have support and dev work on that in a much better fashion. All right. I'm going to do the summary, and then we can look at the other Q&A. I know there's several that have been posted as well, but just a quick summary. We've covered 4 areas again in 23AI for RMAN: new features, greater ease of use, and enhanced tape cloud backup support, improved security, and a lot of new internal optimizations for performance and high availability. As you see these capabilities that were presented, you know, we are constantly trying to, you know, innovate with RMAN in terms of its usage. We know, you know, it's a de facto standard for DBAs in terms of their backup recovery strategies, and so there's a lot's been done. A lot can still be done as well, and we welcome your feedback there. Okay. If you want to learn more, we have a set of documentation links here. I'm going to put these in the chat, or yeah, we can put these in the chat as well, so you can have just access to those URLs. The 23AI Backup Recovery Users Guide and Reference Documentation. We have the Backup Cloud Service Best Practices paper for on-premises databases. We have our MAA Best Practices papers for recovery appliance and for cloud backup cloud service practices for cloud databases. And we also have our 2 Oracle.com product sites for ZDLRA and for ZRCVO recovery service. All right. So let me just get out of here and look at the questions. Okay, let's take a look at the questions here. All right. First question here is about we take PDB backup and unplug PDB database. After that, it creates this XML file, but during restoration on target site, we should not use backup XML to plug the PDB database, but in slide it was showing to use the backup XML during restoration to plug database. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay, so that slide I showed, which, if I just bring it back up with the example, maybe it was a little confusing. Okay, just share that again. All right. So if you look at this example, you'll see that we create that XML backup format on the left side. Okay, this is our backup piece. We want to name it a specific backup piece name. On the right side, we don't actually specify that because the during the restore process, RMAN knows from the catalog what backup piece that contains, right? What that contains the transport metadata, and so it does that transparently for you during the restore. That backup piece name doesn't have to be referenced directly, okay, in a typical situation. If you're not using a catalog, then you do need to copy that XML file over, okay, this unplug XML file over. And as I mentioned here, let's see, going back, going forward. Yes, so you can see here that the transport file you do need to copy that over, but you shouldn't need to um, have any other files that are needed to be accessed by the destination in that case. Okay, it's not on the Q&A. All right, let me just see if I can paste those links to everyone. 1 second. Back to the presentation so that people have reference to those links. Oops. Okay. Here we go. Hopefully you can see this if I put it in chat. All right. I just sent the links to the chat to everyone. Please let me know if that isn't coming through. Okay. All right, let's take the next one. When decommissioning ZDL array to migrate the catalog to new ZDL array, as of now, only replication is the option. Can we have enhancement to export the catalog information without setting up the replication? We have challenges to set up replication between old and new hardware due to DC location network changes. Okay, so today there are two ways to do this. Okay, so one way, as you said, is to set up a replication so that the last full backup is replicated over and seeded in the new recovery appliance, and then further incrementals and virtual fulls are then created through replication that way. But from that point on, that does require replication to be set up. The second way that we just introduced in the February PSU for RA 23.1 software is to use what we call the RACLI migrate appliance command. This allows wholesale migration of all the backups from a source recovery appliance to a destination recovery appliance. It does use replication underneath because it does have to transfer all the backup data over, but that's done underneath for you and not an explicit replication configuration. And so today those two things are needed. The catalog information is separate. Okay, so there is an enhancement request to be able to have the contents of the catalog also synchronized between two recovery appliances without replication, meaning actual active data transfer going. So that particular aspect is an enhancement request today, and we can follow up later, okay, on the status of that enhancement. Can I use 19C data to move copy to OCI with current release 19C only? Yes, you can use 19C database to copy backups to OCI. What we talked about in this presentation is 23AI allows you to a more simplified installer for that backup cloud configuration. Okay, it's simplified. So the end result is you still be able to back up to the OCI and restore from OCI, but makes it easier, okay, in 23AI. Any plans to reintroduce Recovery Advisor or replacement? Oh, I'm glad to hear someone likes Recovery Advisor. This is TBD. We didn't see much usage in the customer base from it. That's one of the main reasons when we're looking at development, budgeting, and resources. If this is something you are really passionate about and want to hear more about, send us a question on our landing page for the office hours. I will say that there's a lot of interesting things going say beyond just RMAN, but rather in our ZDL array, in our recovery service offerings, to be able to do much better recovery monitoring, metrics gathering, and potentially recovery plan recommendations. Okay, so it's not Recovery Advisor, but it's akin to that. And I think because of a lot of the AI push, as we all know, that's going on, it has a huge place in terms of health checks on a customer system and then recommending what's needed for recovery purposes. So you may not see this in a Recovery Advisor fashion, but we are working on some solutions and ideas to be able to do this in our on-premises and cloud environments. Can implicit catalog resyncs on standby now work with sysdba target connections and a implicit catalog reasons on standby. I work with normal, okay, to standby in a backup job. We currently have to go to primary database as target and standby catalog, do resync, then reattempt standby backup. Okay, thank you for bringing this up. 23AI does allow you to do that. That is something I missed in our in this slide deck. We do support standby registration and resync directly with the recovery catalog. The need to go back to the primary and do this, that's been relieved. Yep. And so we'll make sure to add this to the deck, and it's called out as well in the in our documentation. All right, another comment about using the XML file. It is using backup tag name, so it does not need to reference XML. I missed tag details previously. No worries. Yeah, the tag should take care of everything that's needed during that restore command. Any plans to use exascale replacing exadata in future? Oh, replacing exadata. I think I'm not going to comment on futures, hardware directions. Exascale is there. It's available with 23AI. On Exadata. It has a lot of potential. I can say for all of our engineered systems platforms, it's and also obviously for cloud, it's got a lot of merits, right? So we are looking at ways to leverage Exascale in our product offerings, and so yeah, I can't comment on whether we'll replace or anything like that. I think there's a lot of use cases for Exadata platform today, but we'll see how Exascale kind of evolves over time. Okay, ZLI migration to new appliance. You mentioned the second option, RCLI migrate appliance. However, this still depends on the underneath replication configuration. Still the same challenges occur because of the time. The main challenge of replication. Okay, yeah. So if you're talking about actually transferring backup data from one recovery appliance to another, that still depends on replication. Replication is the means to do that. I would suggest you file a question again on our landing pad for the session to work this. This might be a particular issue with your environment, some other challenges going on. We have many customers using replication steady state. It is our foundation for our DR, right, and for our HA strategy for recovery appliance backup. So it should work. It needs to work, okay? And we want to learn why it's not working. So if you can please do that and submit a question, we'll be able to follow up with you that way. Okay. All right.
I only wanted to add about Exascale, and so just an FYI, guys, so that it's fully supported in both OCI and multi-cloud, meaning Azure and Google, in the future AWS, with the OCI recovery service, which is fundamentally based on the same premises of the RMAN development and recovery appliance on premises.
Thanks, Alex. All right. Is there a way to send backups from ZDLR on-prem to S3? There is a way to do that for on-premise S3 devices. If you want to just ask your question on our landing page again, please do so, and we can follow up with the doc to do that. But it's not supported for public S3 storage, but we do allow this for on-premise S3 devices. All right. We are at the top of the hour. This is a very interactive, very lively session, at least from a question point of view. Thank you so much for your feedback. And obviously RMAN is quite close and dear to everyone's hearts, hopefully here. And again, we welcome your feedback. We want to hear your use cases, and so we'll close the session, and we will see you for our next Ask Tom. Thanks so much for joining.